Welcome back to the shed. I'm Fred, and this is my third and final video about Halina cameras. And today what I'm going to look at is the Prinz Mastermatic 5, which was the variation of the Halina 3000, which we looked at earlier. The Prinz cameras, these were mainly sold in the UK through Dixon's, who at the time were quite a big seller in cameras. This camera was introduced around about 1974-75, the same time as the Halina 3000. Made in the same factory, I assume, as in Hong Kong by the W. Harking Enterprises. And it's basically the same camera. I've been wanting to sort of get my hands on one of these for a while, because I just wanted to actually compare the two, you know, side by side. I thought they would actually be pretty much the same camera, and in actual fact they are. The difference is this camera, I actually bought this camera from a online charity shop, and the camera was described as functional but not tested. But in actual fact, when it did arrive, it was completely non-functional. I mean, pretty much, I think the camera, obviously, at some point it had taken a drop. The shutter release was jammed, the wind-on mechanism was jammed, and the little EV light meter there, that was also jammed at its maximum setting of 17, which was a little bit strange. I paid, I think, £2.50 for it, plus I think the same again on postage, so you know, not exactly a lot of money. And I mean, the best thing about these kind of cameras is because you're spending such little amount of money, there's no reason why you can't just basically rip one apart and see if you can fix it. And that's what I did with this camera, and I'll add it on to the end of this video, what I found inside. But basically it had taken a drop, and a small spring had come loose and jammed into the meter, and that caused all the other sort of problems. So it's fixed now, so we've got a functional camera again. Not that I will actually use it, I'm just going to basically use it as a display camera, just to sort of show the difference. So just going through the camera again, as I say, what do you get? Well, it's the same as the Halina 3000, which means it's a manual focus camera, so you have to guess, or what I'd say, guess-o-matic your distance, which is marked out on the scale there. Then you've got the same EV light meter system with it's got the selenium cell just in there. And what you would do, you would set your film speed, which is obviously on the back here. We'll say we'll set that 100 ISA, which is your modern equivalent would be your ISO. And then you would take a light meter reading. In the shed here, we've probably got about 11 or 12, and then you'd have your two choices depending on what you were photographing. If it was a moving object, then you would need to probably adjust your shutter speed slightly higher, probably 125 or the maximum, which was 250, and then you would adjust your aperture accordingly until this little number here, if you make out that little window, this little number here actually corresponded to the number in the EV light meter, so in that case 12, and that gave you a f6. So there we go. So that was basically about it. It's got a 4-speed shutter, same as the 3000, 250 down to 30, and then B stop. It's got flash sync if you use via the PC socket on the front. I believe it's got flash sync at all speeds, which is, you know, it's quite good really in its own way. You've got a hot shoe flash there. On the base of the camera, same as before, you've got a standard tripod mount. You have a little release there for the actual ratchet on the film release, and then you've got the film counter, which again is on the back, which same as the 3000. I always would have thought it would have been a bit nicer to put it on the top, but they never did. So other than that, it's just purely, you know, cosmetics. As I say, when I took this apart, I found that this actual top panel here and the bottom plate are actually plastic, whereas on the 3000 they're a rather nice sort of zinc coated tin or something. It's, you know, so it's a completely different looking camera. It maybe looks slightly more modern, sort of due to it's sort of, you know, a black camera, but basically it's the same thing. And as I said before, you know, if you can pick one of these up cheap, and I wouldn't recommend spending more than maybe, I don't know, £10 at the most, but you've got, you know, quite a useful little camera really. I mean, compared to a lot of other sort of point and shoot type cameras, you know, you've got full manual adjustment here on the shutter speed, you've got full manual adjustment on the aperture, and you've got your built-in light meter. Certainly you've got more creativity than you would have, say, with the Olympus Trip, although it's a superior made camera, but that's purely automatic. On the Trip you can adjust the aperture manually, but the camera reverts down to a set 1/40th of a second shutter speed, which isn't all that useful. So, you know, you've got all the most basic controls that you find on an SLR really, other than you have to sort of guess your focusing. So that's the Prinz Mastermatic 5, and as I say at the end, I'll just tag on the little bit of a video where I actually did do a small repair on this camera. And I think with the new paint that I put on it, it's actually come out quite nice really. So there we go, so they just fit quite nicely side by side, and both quite good examples really of sort of 1970s cameras, which sadly you're never going to be repeated again, where everything these days is purely plastic. But the light meter wasn't actually working on this one, and I suspected that the selenium cell, which you can just make out here, may have burnt out, but when I actually stripped the camera down and took it apart, I found this little spring here that had actually wedged itself onto the actual magnet of the needle indicator there, and as you can see now, the actual light meter is working again. So that's that, got that back together. One interesting thing I've noticed with this Prinz version of the Halina 3000 is that when I've taken the top panel off here, which I'm going to repaint, it's actually made out of plastic, whereas the Halina 3000 is actually sort of a coated tin. So that's obviously a little bit of a downgrade. But this camera, I think for that little spring there to have come out, which is part of the shutter release, I do think that it may have been dropped at some point, and there is actually a very slight chip I notice just inside the lens there, though you probably can't see it on the video, so a little unfortunate, but other than the shutter release being a little bit sort of tricky, it actually now works, and along with the light meter there, that's working. So that's a good £2.50 spent. All of that update, I found that little spring that was jamming the light meter. It ended up, I figured it had to fit just in there, which is just by the shutter release, and that just allows, when I wind it on, there we go, it just allows the shutter release button to just spring over there, so you can actually fully wind the handle, and that's all that was wrong with it, just that little spring in there that caused the camera to actually fail. So quite a simple little repair really. Just decided to do a little bit of resoldering on this camera. A little selenium cell there, the wire was a dry solder joint and the wire actually popped off, and repainted the base plate and also the top there, and I actually think my paint job came out better than the original, and we just reassemble it all together. It's quite interesting to actually have a look at these once one's disassembled, and you can sort of see how basic they actually were. I mean, how this all sort of moves at the bottom here, how it advances the film, and how the actual there we go, that winds on, and how that advances the counter. It's been a little bit through the wars, this camera. I've noticed there's actually a kind of sort of fracture there on the actual shutter cocking mechanism, but it works. I don't know for how long, but as I say, now it's all been painted up and I'll put it back together. It'll be quite a nice little display piece. It just finishes off the three sort of types of camera made.